Thrilled to have one of the great storytellers in sports television, and I don't want to put any undue pressure on him, but it clearly is the case. It is Mike Burks, not Michael, because if you called him Michael, it would be his mom and you'd be mad at him. But it is Mike Burks. He is a sports TV network veteran, and he joins me on my sports media podcast, On to Something Bryan Fenley. I am, that's what they call me. They might call me Joseph Bryan Fenley if they're mad at me because Joseph is my first name. But let's have a fun conversation here with Mike as we get into his life story. We learn the human side of him and also the business side. There's so much to get into. Mike, thanks so much for making the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure, Brian.
How many shows have you produced?
I counted those up a while back and I was over 2,500 live shows, um, which is kind of what I always wanted to do was live TV. I mean, the edit room just didn't do a whole lot for me. It was like too many guys that were in the dark too long drinking bad coffee, and they were never quite the same once their show was done. So I was never an editing guy. So I could do, I hoped anything live, and that's how I spent my career. So probably 2,800, something like that.
How good is your recall of all 2,800 of those shows? If you were to go to like 1 year and one event, how photographic would your memory be?
Um, well, it wouldn't be good. My only point of reference, and I'm not sure I saved them all, would be my expense reports because they they
Oh.
have they have a bit of detail in them, some of which is true and some of which wasn't true. But my expense reports would be as good a guide as anything.
What are those expense reports like when you were the lead producer for the NBA on CBS?
In a word, I would say they were generous. Uh, no, I'm not here to abuse that. It reminds me of a story. I worked with a director named Joe Assetti, who's a legend in the business, and he would go to the British Open each year, and he would put in on his expense report $400 or $500 for tree trimming. But one year, someone at ABC said to him, I watched the British Open. I didn't even see any trees on the course. And Joe wrote back, that guy did a hell of a job, didn't he? No, just that in your calendar, you save your calendar book every year, and that you could piece it together, but there's no way I could recall all of them. You remember the good ones, the bad ones. And I always say, on a Sunday night doing an NFL game and you're flying home, if it went well, you can't wait to do it again. And if it didn't go well, you can't wait to do it and make up for it. So uh, yeah, it's your date books and your expense accounts. And then there's some, stuff along the way that you gather, little snippets or something somebody said or something you put on a wall, a jersey, stuff like that.
This stuff that came out of that Tostitos Fiesta Bowl that you were infamously part of with Boise State,
Yeah.
the recollection that you have of that game, how much does that stand out among the near 3,000 events that you've done?
That was a big one. It was a national, no, no, or sorry, it's a Fiesta Bowl, and it was one of those events that people looked at like, oh, what a mismatch! Mighty Oklahoma is going to take on this little team from Boise that plays on a blue field, and I've always said you have to prepare, you have to go about your business preparing for every event, every game the same way. Don't let the noise out there predetermine how you do your work. So we did our normal work, and we're out of practice watching Boise State, and they're going about their business and with intensity, and spirit was great. And I said to a couple of the guys, I said, I tell you what, these guys are not afraid. Okay, these guys are not afraid, and I think I I carried that into my head into the game, and so nothing that happened was a surprise because anything can happen in any event. Um, but yeah, it was great. I remember the crowd was great, and it was just spectacular. And then the ending to it, of course, with that crazy Statue of Liberty play to win the game, the Boise State player uh, proposing to his girlfriend in post game with Chris Myers at the helm wielding the mic. It was the only time I think I ever saw Chris Myers stunned, but it was great. And then to top it off a year later to win the Emmy for best special, that was really great.
Did Chris Myers end up being the officiant for that wedding?
You know what? I figured that Chris Myers could worm his way into just about anything, so he was probably there as an uninvited guest.
How do you like to get recognition for the work? It's a team thing, but we'd all be lying if we said that there isn't some sort of inner satisfaction that we all get in what we do.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what you want to rely on is your self-satisfaction, being honest with yourself about, hey, was I really, really good today? Was I good today? Was I not good today? I think that's really important because by the nature of sports, which so much of them are on the weekend, by the time, if you're lucky, you get home on a Sunday night from a game, say in the NFL that you did, you, if you're going to wake up Monday morning and rely on someone in management or someone who you don't work with to call you and tell you what a good job you did, you're going to be severely disappointed in your career. You've got to set the bar for yourself and be honest with yourself and say, that's one of the best that I've ever been part of, or I really suck today, or I can't wait for next Sunday to make up for it. And that happens to everybody. But you have to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself because it's such a cyclical thing. By Monday morning, the people that you want to hear from, they're on to other things. They're on to next weekend. So you better have a way of evaluating your work and your team's work and and be the conduit to your team and your announce group that they're not going to get from somebody in the front office.
How long did it take you to come to that realization?
Um, probably the first time I thought I did a good job and I didn't hear from anybody. So no, I don't know. It's a process, getting to the event that you're producing or directing or announcing, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. I was having lunch with one of the great announcers of all time a couple of days ago, Vern Lundquist, and we were trying to explain to a friend of ours who was a Marine fighter pilot in Vietnam just how the business works. And one of the things I said is, you know, as a producer, you have to prepare to the same degree that the announcers prepare. And that might like stun a lot of people, or there might be people in the business that say, oh, that's not true. I don't have to prepare. Well, in my world, for me, I have to know what they know, right down to the numbers on the back of players, correct pronunciation of their names, the rules. I mean, the quickest way in this business to be embarrassed is to A, not know the rules, or B, mispronounce people's names. And you know that from you've covered stuff. So I got a little off track there, but yeah, I just think you have to be an honest evaluator and rely on your team to put their evaluation in and come up with a product that people are happy with on the team.
First of all, you never went off track because everything you said is really, really interesting. The the thought of you preparing to the level of a broadcaster, if I'm watching a sporting event where the producer has done as much homework as the announcer, how might I see that play out on screen? What little clues would I pick up on to know that the producer and the announcer are both going all in on game prep?
I think when I look at an event on TV and I have the sense that the truck knows what the announcers are doing, the announcers know what the truck is doing, is the speed at which it stays in sync. In other words, if you as play by play are just going to launch into something that I don't know what the story is, and the director doesn't know what the story is, then the pictures are going to be hard to follow. Okay, what you're talking about. As you know, when it's going really well, sometimes the announcers lead the truck, and sometimes the truck leads the announcers, and that's done, through the IFB in your headset and with a syntax of a word or two where everybody knows they're on the same page. In other words, we don't speak in long sentences, we don't speak in paragraphs. If we're trying to guide each other towards a story or a picture or whatever it is, it's like that's why we have production meetings, so that we say, okay, here's our best stuff. We hope that's going to work. But sometimes the announcers lead the truck, and sometimes the truck leads the announcers. And when it's going really well in both directions, it's beautiful to watch.
If I'm sitting in a truck that you're doing a game of and producing, and I'm not watching what's on screen, only that which I can do is hear you communicating. What am I going to know? What am I going to get? What am I going to think about as far as what the broadcast looks like in your views on it, based upon how little or how much you are talking, you yourself, during the broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, the best producers in the business, they understand how to communicate without long verbose sentences. Okay, I call it syntax, or it could be there'd be a different word for it, but um, you have a plan when you go into every telecast, and as John Madden used to say, you can't format a live event, and you can't because who knew that Halliburton's Achilles was going to pop in Game 7 of the NBA Finals the other night. I mean, that's stuff happens. So you can have a plan, but you got to have a lot of flexibility based on how things are going. I mean, you don't know the outcome of the game, so you can't dictate all the parts of the game. There are things that can be done where there's opportunities to do them, or I call holes in the action, or um, there's times to do things, but there's other times where the game's going to lead you, and you need to be there for the game. And when the game has its pauses, well, that's where you come in. I mean, in NFL is a perfect example. I've always felt like, as producers and directors, you know, we make our money in between plays. Covering first down, second down, third down, that's not that hard. Okay. What you do between plays, that's the challenge. And that's where the good people excel. Uh, and again, I mean, stuff happens all the time. And how do you react to it in terms of, boy, does that need a replay? Does this need an interpretation? It's, it's you got you can't format the live event, but you better have a plan going in.
There isn't much of a plan, as you said, in knowing how the game is going to play out, which will obviously dictate the story, which will then dictate how everything concludes. But if there was a rough outline for how you like to end a show and what you like to get across, what would that entail?
Well, I don't think it's just an ending. Typically we get new viewers into the events we cover at various times. So I think it's always important to let them know what's happened before they arrived. Uh, and you know, there'll be a lot of storylines in any event. It's just picking out the ones that were the most important. Sometimes it's as simple as, hey, that guy knocked the ball over the wall 3 times in one game. That's a pretty easy storyline. Um, Maybe it's a pitcher who, struck out nine batters in a row, but more importantly, he didn't walk a guy the whole game. So it's just like different things at different times. It can be a defensive play, it can be an offensive play, it can be a series of offensive plays or defensive plays. Um, it's there's a lot of opportunity that comes up out there. Sometimes it's driven by statistics, and sometimes it's not driven by statistics. And I think a lot of stuff I see on TV gets locked into the stats of 15.6 points and 8.7 rebounds, and it's I don't know. I got a little crazy when I started reading decimal points on the screen a lot. So
They're the stats that obviously is sort of like the box score reader can say, okay, so and so only had this number of points in the paint. They went on a 15-2 run in the fourth quarter or whatever to help tell the story. And then there are the stories that are brought in that involve coaches, that involve players that are not specifically related to the game. Maybe there's a hardship that an athlete overcame or something like that. Even something that everybody's talking about. It's uncomfortable to, but say there's a controversy or something like that with a player, and everybody's talking about it, and everybody assumes and expects the broadcast to at least bring it up and not to ignore it. How do you go about including those nuggets, that which comes from the ethos outside of games, and properly place them in their right channels during the broadcast?
well, I think it probably depends on how big a story it was. If it's one that's been a controversy all week, you're going to have a chance to address it in short form before the event starts. Um, I think that's kind of something that you do when there's a controversy. You address it there. You can also come back to it during a 3-hour telecast because there'll be other opportunities to do it. I think picking the right spot to do those kind of stories that have controversy or passion or whatever the emotion is, you need time to tell those stories. So don't try and squeeze it in between second and third down when the defense is changing on the field, and a misplacement of a good story is a bad mistake.
Mistakes that you see coming out of breaks, going into breaks, what would those be?
The biggest, that's biggest, maybe one of the most annoying is uh, broadcasters that can't make a count and they get down cut going to break, and it's like, come on! I mean, we're counting you from 7 or 5, whatever. You're paid to get out clean, and baseball is notorious for that, and the commercial inventory in baseball when you watch it, not on the networks, but off network and on MLB package, is just like it's the most choppy thing you've ever seen. I mean, it's just what the heck is going on here? And I haven't quite figured out all of it, but yeah, I would say make your counts, get in clean. Don't try and do too much on the way to break. That you're always going to have another place to do the business that you didn't get done there. Keep it clean. Let the pictures talk for themselves. Use a small amount of words if you need words at all. Remember, there's generally music playing over some really great pictures, and maybe just let people enjoy that. It doesn't have to be filled up.
What led you to break away from living in major metropolitan areas like San Francisco or Los Angeles, and you find yourself now in Colorado?
You know, I guess if you've ever spent, there's a saying up here in Steamboat that you come for the skiing and you stay for the summer. And once you stay for the summer, you realize, oh my God, I wish it was like this all year long. It's magnificent. You're at 7, 8, 10,000 feet. Uh, the air's clean. There's a lot of things to do outdoors. You good friends. The quality of life is good, and it's far less complicated, I guess. All of that rolled into one ball.
What do you like to do when it comes to stuff outdoors?
I think just being outdoors is number one. Skiing, occupies, 4 months of the year up here, and it's a great ski area. Uh, when the snow melts, you've got, fishing and rafting, and when the water drops, you've got tubing down the river and on the 4th of July. Um, you have good friends. It gives you a feeling about the quality of your life, I think, is when you're here and you're not living in a rat race where, oh my God, I've got to get in my car an hour before the appointment because if I don't, I'm going to get stuck in traffic, and that's hard. That's hard for people. It's just things are less complicated here, and I think that's what's it for me. And alongside that would be the beauty of the place, uh, and that says a lot.
When we were talking beforehand, you're mentioning that where you live now, traffic isn't necessarily just caused by other cars.
No, we have the largest herd of elk in North America, about 250,000 elk that all hang out in the greater Steamboat area. And there's a clip on YouTube called Steamboat Rush Hour. And if you want to see about the size of these animals, go to YouTube, put in Steamboat Rush Hour or Rush Hour Steamboat, and there's a clip of about 400 of them crossing the main highway at 7 a.m. in the morning. Um, it'll just kind of take your breath away if you've never seen elk, which are about 1,200 pounds, an animal. It's a pretty impressive sight.
How many elk do you think you've seen yourself?
I would say hundreds of them. Um, they they're like ghosts. You see them early in the morning when they come down to get their water. And so if you want to see them, you got to get up early. And then they come down after dusk. And during the day, they're back up in the mountain, and you don't see them. They bed down for the day, and they're a rare sight. They're a beautiful animal, and they're definitely a part of life out here in Colorado.
You stepping outside of life in these major metropolitan areas, how has that impacted the way that you go about television? Just seeing life, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, but just seeing life from this broader perspective where you've got scenery and you don't have to deal with the rat race of traffic and people congregating everywhere and the chaos.
Yeah, and I think that having lived in LA and lived in San Francisco for a very long time, the things you described there is that takes up a lot of your day, just getting from A to B to C. And on top of it, you're trying to find time in your day to do what you need to be ready for your event, whether you're an announcer, a producer, or director. I feel like living up here, there's more hours in the day, and there's more time to do other there's time to do other things other than just getting from A to B to C, and that's a good feeling. I mean, maybe in the morning you can linger for 15, 20 minutes, with your partner and to say, have a second cup of coffee and enjoy each other. Because you know what? I'm just going down to my office and I got plenty of time to get this work done today. And I'm going to have a kind of non-interrupted day. Um, so I guess that's what I would say is the days feel like they have more hours in them, particularly the summer when it's, it's not dark till 9:30 at night. So
With that said, waking up A, you going to sleep B in the summer with those extra hours, what does it look like for you right now?
well, I've never been somebody that needed 8 hours sleep. And it's a good thing I didn't need it because I never get it. I'm just like, if I don't know, it just, you just look forward to the day. You look forward to, how beautiful the place is. And when we get done, this is going to be a big rush on real estate here, Brian. It's going to be your fault.
Yeah, so how do you think once more and more people start to get aware of where you live, how would that impact the elk population? Let's just go there.
Yeah, no, you know what? They do okay for themselves. They migrate out in the part of the year and they come back and they're not the only animals around here. We have bears and we have mountain lions and we have foxes and you name it, we have it here. But you know what? They were here before we got here, so it's just you honor them, and I think people here are good about that.
You know what's so ironic? Because I was reading an article and you gave a quote where you're talking about how if you want to work in like a peaceful, quiet environment, that being in the truck is not for you. But this is exactly what you're running to right now. Peaceful environments in living. So to see both sides of you, I feel like what you didn't get when it comes to and are getting when it comes to work, how much do you see that you're sort of using this move to Colorado as a way to fill the hole of what you didn't get when you are working?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but I would say that I love my time in the truck, and I love the pressure, and I love trying to sort out 20 different voices that are talking to you at the same time. The pressure of live it's unmatched in everyday business. Maybe you're on the floor of Wall Street. I've never been there, but the chance to get it right, only one chance to get it right. And like we talked about earlier, self-evaluation, self-critique. Um, I'm sure you've heard the saying, there's never been the perfect show done in sports coverage, and there never will be. I mean, there's always going to be something that didn't go exactly the way you had it you had it planned, and that's part of it. So I think because I had so many campaigns, if you will, in different sports for 4.5 decades, that uh, okay, and I didn't have as much time as I have now to enjoy the things in life that now I do have a little more time, and in some cases I have a lot more time. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, and I wouldn't trade either of those. The feeling of euphoria when a show goes so great and it's exciting and there's such a storyline and everybody's hitting their marks. I mean, that's a feeling I don't know how else I could get that feeling. And at the same time, a beautiful day in the mountains. You're never going to get that in the truck. So I've just been blessed that I've been able to have both those things in my life.
Well, as we conclude this conversation, I feel blessed for the opportunity to hit on some of those storylines, and I felt like we did hit those marks in
Yeah,
this show. It really
yeah,
did feel like we did. And I know that there's no such thing as a perfect show, but I do feel like as close to perfect as to getting inside of your headspace, I felt like we were able to accomplish. Mike, this was
yeah.
an absolute honor. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I enjoyed it very much. And anytime, anytime you want to do again, I'm at the other end of your phone.